I'm Matt.
I'm Kerry.
We are the Stagmer brothers of Baltimore Knife and Sword. We're going to be building some of your favorite weapons, and some weapons that you've never seen before.
This is Man-at-Arms, Reforged.
Once again on Man-at-Arms, we're returning to League of Legends. We're going to build the Nameless blade of Yasuo, the Unforgiven.
This sword is kind of an over-the-top katana build with some really fancy fittings. So obviously I have to hand this off to Ilya, who's gonna do all the blade forging. We're gonna do some really cool hollow forming techniques to do the guard and the pommel. And I think you guys are really gonna like this build. To make the katana-like blade, we could start from much smaller stock and just go right to hand forging. But since we have large power hammer, we might as well start from a big cube of W1 and break it down. Ilya's gonna go from the forge straight to the hammer and get this thing out to a bar. It's gonna take him 3 or 4 heats, and then he'll be able to begin the blade forging. So there's a whole lot of different art. This piece of art, however, is quite pleasing to the eye and would function quite well as a sword. So what I've done is I've traced the whole outline of this guard and all the details. I then pulled it out here and then separated everything. These are our 2 base parts. This is an overlay that'll get sculpted and then welded onto here, one on each side. This overlay here will go on this base part, get sculpted, one on each side as well, and then all these parts will get welded as one solid object. Now what I have to do is trace the outside of our pommel. We're gonna cut our pommel out of close to 1 inch thick material, and then I'm gonna do a whole lot of sculpting on the sander afterwards, but there's our perimeter, scaled to the same size as the guard pieces, ready to cut. To create the guard for this sword, there are a lot of different options. What I've chosen to do, since Ilya's busy, is we're gonna do a bunch of different overlays. We're gonna layer them all up, we're gonna sculpt them before we weld them together, and that's gonna give us our depth and really give you that nice organic feel. Let's cut our parts. Starting at the shoulder, Ilya begins to do the hand beveling on the edge. He'll work his way all the way to the tip, and then he'll define that area as well. Unlike a lot of the other katana builds, this doesn't have a defined kasaki. It kind of just rounds up to the tip, so he doesn't have to worry about that part at all. Ilya did a great job forging this big blade. I say big blade, I guess as far as man-at-arms blades go, it's not that large. But as far as katanas are, this thing is a beast. But my job right now is just to hog some material off, get the edge a little thinner. We're gonna leave it slightly thick so it's safe for that heat treat. We are gonna clay this and give it a hamon. And there's a fuller down the back, which we haven't done on a katana yet. I'm not gonna do that before heat treat though. I'm just gonna take a little material off the edge and do some profile grinding and hand it to Ilya for heat treat.
about to apply clay to Yasuo's blade. Matt asked me to produce a flamboyant hamon that's reminiscent of blood splatter to recapitulate the story of Yasuo. However, before I do any of that, I'd like to show you something. This blade right here is my personal one that I'm working on. This is made from traditional material, mahogany from Japan. Quite a bit smaller than Yasuo's blade over here. You also notice that it is straight. That is because traditional materials like being water quenched. In the water quench, the blade first curves this way and then establishes its final curve as it completely cools off. That phenomenon is not present when we're quenching the steel in oil, as we're going to do with Yasuo. As the blade cools off, it loses curvature. Because of that, I had to overcurve the blade in order to set up my final geometry after the quench.
So we have about 10 separate pieces that are going to make up our cloud motif guard. Each individual one has to be drastically sculpted to give it an organic shape and feel. I'm going to start with this piece here, kind of looks like a little dagger. I got to edge it just like I would a knife. Then I got to round out this whole scroll piece, and then we'll see how it all fits together. After I get this piece rounded and this piece edged, I'm gonna use this piece, and I gotta do some cut-in work. It's a little trickier sculpting.
After grinding a whole lot of detail and depth in my overlays, I'm now gonna add some texture to the background using a planishing hammer. I think this looks a lot like clouds, and it's a lot more pleasing to the eye.
Alright, we have all of our pieces now prepped and ready for welding. We now are going to start constructing the guard. You can see we have a sword shape opening right here. First panel is our wing-like section that goes here. And then what I'd like to call our yatagan plate. Put our overlays on top. And that's basically how it's going to look. Very fluid, very natural. Super happy with this. I'm just going to tack everything in place. Start off, flip it over, tack the other side together. And then we'll do all the structural welding around the perimeter.
Because of how shallow our heat treating forge is, Ilya is going to have to be very careful with this large sweeping blade. He's going to keep it in the air so that he doesn't bump off any of the clay. Once this piece has a nice even heat over the entire length, he'll bring it out and go into the oil quench.
Now that the blade has been heat treated and tempered, I can go ahead and finalize the geometry and then move on to the polishing grits. I'm gonna start at 24 grit and then move all the way through. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna do one side so that we can get a quick peek at the hamon.
After sanding the blade all the way through 400 grit, it's now time to move on to Scotch-Brite. Now that I've Scotch-Brited the blade, you can really see that hamon pops in the light. Ilya really went out of his way to make it look like blood splatter and water. I think he did a great job.
All right, we have our guard all welded together. I'm gonna go ahead and start blending off that weld. and where the seams show through, I'll just go back and weld a little more, blend a little more. And I know this is a little out of order. Let's go ahead and get a sneak peek of what this looks like on the blade, because I am excited. Dude, looks perfect. I'll just go back here, add a little weld so it stops on the shoulder so it doesn't keep sliding.
We're now getting ready to cut the pommel for our League of Legends build. We're going to cut it out of a piece of 3/4 inch mild steel. The basic design of the pommel and guard are based on a Japanese cloud style motif. So we're going to cut the perimeter in our CNC plasma, and then Matt will sculpt it to shape to give it that cloud pattern.
All right, John's cut me out the perimeter of our pommel. You can see I drew in there with a Sharpie some details. I'm gonna use the corner of this sander and this sander mostly, but we're just gonna go ahead and get to sculpting. The thing I have to focus on the most is doing the correct order of operations, because it has so much depth and layered. If I sculpt one first, it needs to be lower than the other, so on and so forth. Probably gonna hand it off to Ferenc at the very end to do the inside of this curl, just because I don't have a wheel that's small enough to get in there and do that.
The Scotch-Brite wheel that we use on this machine looks like it's very hard. It's actually a soft wheel that does an extremely good job of blending and polishing forms. John now wraps the cord over the handle. This will both give an ornamentation and a much firmer grip. Scurry back to your shadows, ninja. Everyone faces a reckoning. Click here to subscribe, or click here to watch more episodes. Thanks for watching Man-at-Arms Reforged. We need to know what you want the guys to build, so tell us in the comments below what weapons you want to see next.